right. Well, we want to welcome you to our next, and I guess this is the last Mayborn Mentors event of the fall semester. My name is Trent Walters. I'm one of the Mayborn School Board participants, and me as well as Teresa Kuchner are responsible for the Education Committee. And what we do is we look for ways to connect students to folks in the actual industries that you guys are studying about, to make real world connections, to show how what you are studying and what you were thinking you want to do from a study standpoint translates into the real working world. Make connections and then ask questions and really figure out what it's going to be like to have a career in that particular profession. So today we're excited about having a sports communications panel for you all today. And excited to have 4 really fantastic panelists up to talk and to tell you guys about what it's like to work in sports communications and some of the ins and outs of that. So we've got some really great questions, 4 great panelists ready to go. And we're excited that you guys are here. I think there'll be people coming in and out. Keep in mind, it's also, it's being recorded. This will also be able to be used for other students who are not able to attend. They'll be able to get online and watch some of this as well. But you guys that are here today will have the benefit of, towards the end, being able to ask questions of these fine panelists as we get into the discussion. So be ready with your questions as we get towards the end, but we're excited to have them here. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'll call on them sort of one by one. Why don't we start with Kyle Smith.
Hey everybody, thanks for being here. I know I'm excited to be here. My name is Kyle Smith. I'm the Director of Digital and Social Media here with the Texas Rangers. So hope all of you are some baseball fans here in the area. This is I just completed my 6th season here. Grew up in Fort Worth down the street, so lifelong Rangers fan. And this has been a lot of fun in this role, and there's a lot of good things coming. So excited to talk with all of you today.
Great, thanks for being here, Kyle. Mimi Akoje.
That's great, Trent. Really impressive. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here as well. Echo what Kyle said. My name is Mimi Akoje. I am the Associate Director of Digital Engagement for Spurs Sports and Entertainment. A lot of you, I'm sure, know the San Antonio Spurs, but we also own a few other franchises. We own a soccer team. We have a G League NBA team, NBA G League team. And then we have a foundation as well as a youth sports part of our group. So sort of oversee social media and what we call digital partnerships for all of our franchises. I'm new to Texas, new to San Antonio. I grew up in Nigeria for about 16 years, then spent about 15 years-ish in LA, and then just moved to San Antonio earlier this year. So really excited, learning a lot about Texas and enjoying all the good food that's here. So I'm excited to be here on this panel, really excited to chat with you guys.
Great, thank you so much, Mimi. Next, let's talk with Cam Trahan.
Yes. Good day, everyone. My name is Camila Trahan. I am currently working at UNT with the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences. I think I might be a little bit different than the rest of the panel on here. I did work in sports as a sideline reporter and TV reporter. Also worked in sports information, college athletics. I'm originally from Oceanside, California, and so I am new to Texas area. I'm excited to talk to everyone to, answer your question that you may have, in this industry that is, known as, I guess, the best entertainment there is.
Perfect. And apologies for your last. I asked about Mimi's and didn't manage to screw yours up. I apologize for that. Last but not least, Bobby Crook. Hope it's pronounced Crook.
Nailed it.
Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Hi, guys. My name's Bobby Crook. I'm a special assignment cross-checker with the Texas Rangers, which kind of a fancy way of saying I'm an amateur scout. I travel the country and watch baseball games. So could be a lot worse than that. I took my journalism degree in a little different direction than some of these guys. I've been with the Rangers for 19 years now, so I've got a little time on Kyle, and fired up to get to talk to you guys today.
Awesome. Well, this is fantastic. Again, thank you all for accepting the call. Many of you, it was a bit of a cold call as I was reaching out and just saying, hey, can you talk with some students and get them inspired about a sports journalism career. So let's talk about it. So I want to talk to you guys each about first, how did you decide you wanted to be in sports marketing? Tell us a little bit about your different journeys and how you went from either a journalism major or something to that particular discipline. Why don't we start with Mimi? Why don't we start with you, and then we'll kind of work our way around.
Yeah, so I've had a bit of a journey getting into sports. I've been an athlete all my life, in a bunch of different sports: basketball, football, or soccer, mixed martial arts, MMA. So like I've always been sports has been a part of my life, my personal life. And about 8 years ago, I was like, you know what? I love this so much. I like, why am I not working in sports? It was sort of like a duh moment. And I remember telling my friends that I'd come to this realization, and they were all sort of like, well, yeah, we figured this out a long time before you did. So welcome. But I'd already started in my career, and I didn't want to take a step back and start in like a lower level role just to get into sports. So throughout my career, I worked in entertainment and I worked in tech, and every role that I took on, I was very thoughtful in whatever the responsibilities were, whether that was at NBC or a startup that I worked at. How would this translate to a team for when I'm ready to move over into, I wanted to work for a team. That was my ideal goal. So I made sure that every job I took, the responsibilities would look well or look good on a resume when I eventually was reaching out to teams and I was ready to make that leap. But most importantly, I talked to a lot of people. I talked to any and everyone that I could get connected to that worked in sports or worked in something related to sports, just so I could understand what was needed and what kind of people worked in the industry, what responsibilities they looked for, and just really made sure to build my network. So that was really key for me.
Awesome. Network building is huge, and I'm sure I think with every panel we've talked a lot about doing that, and it's really the reason why we're having these, is to help the students build their networks and make connections. Bobby, talk about your background and how you got where you are right now.
Yeah, mine is kind of a similar background where I grew up playing sports, specifically baseball. Went to a small college in the area, University of Dallas, for a couple years to play, and realized like, hey, I want to be a Major League Baseball player. It's not going to happen. And so journalism was kind of my outlet. I was like, okay, I'll cover the game. I'll do that. So I transferred to UNT, graduated from the journalism school, was lucky enough to get an internship with the Rangers, actually in the communications department. And from there, I got to know the guys on the other end of the building in the baseball department. They realized I had a playing background and that I knew a little bit about the game. And I don't know, I've tricked them ever since. They let me hang around ever since. So like I said, this year 19, on the scouting personnel side, it's a little different, obviously, but same core stuff. You get to see something, you get to write about it, you get to be involved in the game. So
that's great. So you're using your writing background and a lot of what you learned in the J school, in the scouting side of what you're doing. Just real quick, talk a little bit about some of that.
Yeah, for sure. So at essence, our job is to report on players. So you go see a player wherever, you have to file a report. So the ability to be able to describe what you saw and what you think these players will be in the future in a concise and readable manner is huge. You can get your point across a lot easier. Actually, was thinking about doing this yesterday. I had an interview with a player yesterday, with he and his family, and you're talking to them about professional baseball and things like that, and kind of hit me like, the journalism background goes a long way, and being able to draw information out of these people and to be able to build relationships and things like that with players that you hope to add to the organization. So even though it's not really a journalism job, the stuff I learned at UNT I use every day.
That's fantastic. And I think what we're hoping to show the students is that a degree in journalism has so many different ways that it can go, and so many different places where it can take you. And these folks here that we're talking to are just further evidence of that. So it helps you sort of expand your thinking. I'm majoring in this, but there's so many different areas that this can expand into. So that's great. Cam, let's talk a little bit about your road.
Yeah, so my road is a little non-traditional. Both my parents are in the military, and so whenever they would go off and take care of what they had to do, I stayed back with my grandparents, who were from the Bay Area. And my grandfather was a season ticket holder to everything Oakland or anything Bay Area. And so he took me to this football game. I'll never forget it. It was the Raiders. And I saw this female sports reporter on the sideline. It was both Pam Oliver and Lisa Salters. And I told my grandfather, I was like, I want to do that. I wanted to do that because I saw the relationships that they were having with not only the players, but also the camera people and the water boys. Every time I saw them, they were always smiling. And keep in mind, both my parents are in the legal field. So for me to go into something arts was just a red flag for them. Did my undergraduate study, former student athlete that played tennis. I was #1 in singles and #2 in doubles. And love the game, still play it to this day. And so the agreement was, you graduate, you get a job. If you don't get a job, you got to go to law school. And so, of course, I didn't want to go to law school. So I'm in California. So I started doing a ton of research, like what could I do to get that job that those two young ladies have? And I stumbled across Manship School of Journalism in Baton Rouge. I applied for this job at WBRZ as an apprentice. And what I didn't know as part of being an apprentice, that I got a full ride to LSU. So I was like, I'm going to get a master's degree and be able to learn the industry of what TV journalism is, broadcast journalism is. So I completed my apprenticeship. I learned every aspect of the television station. I learned how marketing worked. I learned programming. I learned sales. I learned traffic. I learned the administrative side of it. I learned engineering. As an apprentice, it was very strategic of the things that I learned. And so landed my first job as a sideline reporter. But before I got there, I was a producer, a morning show producer, which means I went in at 2:00 in the morning and my shift was done at 8. But I stayed and navigated to the sports desk because I was like, hey, how can I help? I would go along with the photographers, the camera guys, and be their stringers, holding the cord. I was just implementing myself into the field. And it was my mentor, Derek Hackett, who encouraged me to start writing. He's like, you were really good with, writing. He said, you should write. And I was like, I don't want to write. I want to be on the desk. And so he said, in order to get there, you need to learn how to write. You need to become a strong writer. And so I did that. And so I worked in 3 markets. I encountered so many different players. And then TV started to tank. And I was like, okay, now I need to figure out what's next because these TV jobs are getting slimmer and slimmer because communication is going a different path. And one of my good friends, some of you might know her, LaChina Robinson and Jamil Hill, they told me about the NCAA programming that they had for women communication, women and minority. So I applied for that position, got it, and that is how it opened the doors for me to work in college athletics and pro teams. I did that until last year, made the transition from college athletics to just doing marketing communications. But I still have a pulse and a hand into writing. And I also still do a post in terms of reporting because of the relationships that I established and the contacts that I have in the industry.
Wow, that's great. And it reinforces another common theme that we're finding with all these different panels is just writing is important. You guys are in one of the best majors you can be, because it's one thing that's not going away is writing. My wife's she was a middle school English teacher. And one of the things she talks to students that she still tutors now is like, writing is it. Like you're never, that's one skill you are going to have to use regardless. So being good at it is super important. Kyle, definitely not least, but last, talk about your journey.
Yeah, like Bobby said, like, sports was kind of my passion growing up, especially baseball. So I grew up playing it, through college. Unfortunately, Bobby and his crew didn't find a 5'5" middle infielder utility guy too attractive to play for the Rangers. So I decided to abandon that pretty quickly, but didn't take away from my love from the sport. Growing up, like you kind of touched on writing, Trent, and like I always loved to write. Like ever since I was little, I would write short stories. I would either like write about games or I would write short stories with like friends in school, which now is like, man, that was kind of weird, but I did it. So I always had an affinity towards writing. So I actually went to University of Texas. I didn't go to UNT, but when I got there, I knew I wanted to be involved in sports. I didn't know to what degree or anything like that. So I actually went into school. I didn't have a major decided. I started in journalism, and the more I kind of started working through and going through the classes, I found myself more interested in kind of like the business side of sports, and actually moved out of writing. Now today I'm in, social media, so writing is still very important, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But how I got involved in sports, while I was at UT, I played club baseball there all 4 years. In my senior year, there was this, I can't remember what the name of the class was, but our professor used to be the chairman of the board for the Rangers. And it was like one of those Wednesday night, 3-hour long classes. And, you would talk about everything pretty much in the sports business daily journal. And kind of what happened was in the middle of the semester, like I got to know him pretty well. They opened up an opportunity with the New York Mets. It was a remote opportunity, and that basically I would skip my summer semester of my senior year to move to New York and pursue a media relations job at the New York Mets. I know it sounds random, but how that connection happened was that the professor knew the director of communications of the Mets. So that's how that relationship was established. And I was lucky enough to land it. I actually went to the kind of luck worked in my favor. The winter meetings, they do like an annual job fair, and the winter meetings that year happened to be in Dallas. So I actually met up with the Mets people when I was there. It was a great networking opportunity. And in January, I had never been to New York in my life, moved up there. It was like pretty eye-opening. Like to this day, I still consider that like my study abroad. And ended up being there for a semester. And, once I was there, I was like, man, this is what I want to be doing. I want to be in baseball. The unfortunate side of sports is, it's competitive and there's not a whole lot of openings. So my internship ended and there wasn't a job opening. So I was like, man, what am I going to do? So I went back to UT in the summer, got my degree in advertising, and then actually accepted a job back in New York, working at an ad agency, doing sponsorships for Verizon. So I was working with NFL teams daily, NBA, Mets again, actually, and we were helping fulfill all of Verizon's contractual sponsorship assets. So it was a little bit different path than actually like writing. It kind of goes to show you that there's a lot of other sides to the sports entertainment industry, even if journalism you decide journalism isn't what you want to do. But I ended up staying up in New York for about 4 years. Just happened to be on the couch one day watching college football and saw a job posting come through on Twitter with the Rangers. And I was like, man, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try applying for this. And timing worked out. Ended up moving back down to Texas. My parents live in Fort Worth, and been here since February of 2016. While I was up in New York and some previous internships, I was working in social and digital media, so the transition worked out nice. And by the time I got to the Rangers, I had a lot of institutional knowledge about the club, and being a huge fan for as long as I had been, it was a great fit for me, and I've never been happier. It's a rewarding experience. It's a great organization, and really makes me feel like I can use my tools and my skills. So like the writing every day, like I finally get to bring that back to life after dusting it off for a few years. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's great. That's great. I'm hearing a theme that's kind of consistent across a lot of you guys, and it's that you want to get into sports. For many, it was a challenge. There wasn't sort of a direct path. You had to sort of pivot at times and do some different things in order to get what you wanted. What should students, and I'm off script, I apologize. I know I sent you guys the questions in advance, but you guys, I'm already off script. But what should the students be thinking about as they're coming out? What does the environment look like right now in your industries? And what advice would you give them as far as pivoting, or maybe there's not a direct way in, but how should they be thinking about accepting or taking no's and continuing on with their goals and not giving up? Oh, whoever wants to jump in on that one first.
I could jump in. In terms of the market right now, it seems like a lot of places are hiring a lot. So it seems like there's a ton of opportunity right now, both within our organization and also just what I see from other organizations. So there's opportunity. I think something that's really important is, and this is sort of related to networking, but specifically the types of questions and the types of conversations you have with people as you're networking. So one is being very thoughtful about why you're meeting up with people or what you're trying to get out of your networking conversations and relationships. But there's so many different types of jobs that, hell, there's jobs I'm finding out exist now that I never knew existed, like much less when I was just getting out of school. There's so many different types of jobs outside of what we traditionally know, what we traditionally think about when we think like broadcasting or marketing or whatever it is. And so it's really important to talk to people or just really scour job sites and understand the different opportunities that are available, because there might be an opportunity that you might end up loving. You just wouldn't have known about it because you're only looking for the traditional things that you have learned about. So that's a really key thing, is being really curious about what's out there and thinking non-traditionally. You sort of have to think outside the box. And sometimes you have to create your own job. I've done that at a couple companies where there was an opportunity that didn't exist and no one was doing it. And I was like, you know what? I could do this. You guys could pay me for it. So, and it worked out. So, take a chance on yourself as well.
That's great. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'll add to it. I would say you have to be a chameleon in this field. You're going in with the mindset that you want to become, like you want to write feature stories, or you want to do this or want to do that. You have to be adaptable. I learned that very early on when I worked for the Memphis Grizzlies. When people used to ask me, "Oh, what did you do for them?" I was a glorified babysitter. I literally had to make sure the players made all of their community appearances. But along the way, I breached those relationships with those guys. And so you have to be willing to adjust and be a chameleon with whatever's asked of you. Now, when I was with the organization, my title was community relations, which was writing community content. But on any given day, if I got the call or the text, is like, hey, you need to make sure Shane is making this appearance, or you need to make sure Drew is going to Mississippi or something. And I'm from California, and I own my weaknesses, which is geography. I am not good with directions. And so there was quite a few times where they would be somewhere else and I'm somewhere else. And so it got to the point where I'm like, okay, this is where we're going to meet. And this is we're going to go together. And so you have to be willing to become that chameleon. Another thing I would say is join professional organizations at the student chapter. That is what I did. I was involved in every chapter related, or every organization related to communications, to marketing, to sports, and I'm still active with all those organizations. I am in PRSA. I started out in PRSSA. I'm in NABJ. I ran for student president for NABJ. I was on the sports task force. I'm in WISE. I'm in Women for Communication. I'm in Awesome, Association for Women in Sports Media. I started off as a student. I found a way to find a mentor or someone that was willing to bring me up in the field. And then I became a full-time member. And one of the things that I vowed is that I would never stop belonging to those organizations because they paved the way for my career. And I also want to say pay. Just because you have these grand titles, you're not going to make the pay that you will see the anchors on TV or what the players make. I get, one of the things that I would chuckle about is when I would hear people at the water cooler talking about, oh yeah, this guy signed this 20 million contract. And I'm like, have you seen the barter book? Just because they signed it, they're not getting that. Do you know where the money's coming from? So don't get into the field because of the money. Get into it because you want, to be rewarded and you want to be able to craft your skill set. Now, my first job, like I said, with the Memphis Grizzlies, I was making $25,000. To be exact, it was $24,817. I'll never forget it. But I was working 70 hours. But I knew I had to do that in order to make a name for myself within, the NBA or within any professional organization. And so you just have to be willing to say the yeses even when you really want to say no, but know your limits. And for me, and I'm pretty sure just like everybody on this panel, we were hungry. You've got to stay hungry because you know what? The next generation of students or people that are interested in your field are coming after you. I'm still mentoring some of my students that, I came up along the way and I told them, if you're not coming for my job, then I didn't do my mentoring right. So stay hungry, stay focused, but know what you want.
That's good. That's real good. I guess for Kyle and for Bobby, along the lines of what Ken was saying. So what do you guys feel like are the most important qualities? Like if someone's coming for your job, what are going to be some of those qualities that they're going to need to have in order to take it, for lack of a better term? What do they need to make sure they have?
I mean, I think especially like at the early stages, the work ethic part is huge. Cam kind of hinted at it, especially in professional sports. There's a lot of people that want these jobs, and it's a thing of like you've got to separate yourself. And a lot of times the way you can do that is just working harder than other people. And like you said, I mean, my first salary was the same thing. It was $25,000, and it was 70, 80 hours a week. And I was 22 years old and I absolutely loved it. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but when you first get started, like you have to be willing to put in a ton of hours. And there's going to be times where you go home and you're like, why am I doing this? And I think you keep grinding, it pays off. But I do think like, especially early on, the work ethic part is huge.
Yeah, I agree with everything Bobby just said. And I think one thing to build off what Cam was saying is one thing I realized when I got into sports is like you're working with a ton of people. So whether they're people on your team, people in your department, especially for me in marketing, like we're working with Bobby's group, we're working with Foundation, there's all sorts of different entities and people and personalities that you're working with, to where I feel like a good attribute to have is just be as personable. Like you need to be willing to accept criticism, willing to work and learn and grow on the job. I know looking back on it, like I wish I would have done more group projects and group entities, like, you know, joining more groups in college, because I feel like once I got to where I am today, like you're constantly working with people. So coming in with the mindset that, you know, you're going to be contributing as a team, you're going to get work done as a team, coming with that mindset will really help you.
I think the other thing too, you know, I think Mimi said something early on, like things are different now than they ever have been. People are able to do a bunch of different jobs that maybe 30 years ago, especially in the sports fields, like they would have been ignored. You know, I thought when I was coming up, like the reason I didn't think I could get into scouting when I was, you know, in journalism school was I didn't play 30 years in the big leagues and, you know, have a bunch of tobacco in my mouth and like this old grizzly guy. Like I didn't think everything I'd seen on TV and the guys I knew growing up were that kind of guy. It wasn't young, college educated, that type of deal. I think like the workforce now is way different. I think the people that are getting hired in professional sports aren't just people that played professional sports. And I think the worst thing you can do as someone who's starting out is limit yourself and say, oh, I can't get into that side of things, or I can't do this, because I think there's way more opportunities now than there ever have been.
That's fantastic. Yeah. This next question I have specifically for Mimi, and it was based on what you talked about with your background. You talked about not necessarily having per se the sports experience that you wanted when you first came out. So you took jobs that would look good on your resume as you pursued your ultimate goal of getting into sports. What advice would you have for the students that are some of those, hey, I know you want to get into sports, but consider these types of things that will make you more attractive and will look good on your resume today, as far as someone that sports people are looking for, so that they can think, okay, if I can't necessarily get into sports right now, I could start here and I could go here and I could perhaps go here.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll talk a little bit about what I did specifically, but I'll also talk about what I've seen now that I'm in the industry. So first of all, now that I'm in the industry, one thing I've noticed is that I think in years past, if you didn't have sports experience, that was sort of a knock against you. It carried a lot of weight, whereas nowadays it's starting to flip a little bit, and there are a lot of teams and organizations, sports teams and sports orgs that are specifically looking for people from different industries, because you bring in a different mentality, you bring in a different mindset, you bring in a different set of experience that is transferable, but you sort of think of things differently, right? So for me, having worked in entertainment and having worked in tech was a big bonus, because even though it wasn't sports, there was a lot of things I'd done that I'm doing now. I just did it in a different industry. And so like my brain thinks about things a little bit differently. And then what I did when I was coming up, I used to take a lot of job descriptions, and so when I was a coordinator, I would look at job descriptions at like manager level and just really look at the responsibilities there. And then I would try to take on projects at work that where I'd be able to say, okay, I've done this. Or when I was moving up and getting a new job, I would make sure that it aligned with a lot of the research I'd done, with a lot of the job responsibilities that I'd taken a look at. So I was constantly looking at job descriptions at different teams and different orgs, and just really paying attention to the sort of things that people are asking for. The other thing that I did is I talked about networking. A couple of really key people in my network that were sort of lifesavers were people who worked in HR and recruiting. So for example, I have someone who's a friend now, but works in recruiting at the NBA and places people at different teams. And so I would meet with him. I met with him quite a few times and talked about like what I was doing at my roles where I was. And then we talked about where we saw the sports world going over the next few years. And it was sort of like I was on a collision course with teams and just waiting for teams to catch up to what I was doing. So one of the things I was doing was digital partnerships I did that at NBC, and I did that at a startup where I was just looking for ways to monetize the things that we were doing on our digital platform. So at NBC, for example, we had an app for all of our shows, and we were constantly looking for ways to monetize different aspects of the app or monetize different things that we were doing on social media. Sports wasn't doing that yet. It just wasn't a thing. A lot of sports partnerships have historically been in person or in arena, but I knew and he knew that eventually that was going to happen, right? Like the world is becoming so much more digital and social that you're crazy if you don't think that eventually that's going to be monetized in sports. And so having those conversations and knowing that, okay, eventually that's going to happen in the sports world, it's let me keep shoring up my experience and my expertise here so that when it's time, I could go in and say, look, I've been doing this for the past however many years. I know you guys want to do this. It just makes sense to hire me for this job. And that's half of what I'm doing right now. So thankfully it worked out. But those conversations were really, really beneficial to me being able to keep an eye on what was going on, even though I wasn't there yet.
That's great. You're very strategic in terms of what you wanted and making sure you had those exact qualities as you were growing up through the profession. So that's a really good insight for the students and any of us to take on. So it's interesting because I think that when you think about sports, it seems like, God, you guys this must be the most fun, exciting, glamorous job in the entire world, right? Like who wouldn't want to do something in sports? But there's always a flip side to every job, and not necessarily wanting to dive into negatives, but what's some of the things that, the lesser known things that people may not know about what you all do or what you do in sports, that you just kind of have to get your head around. It's like, yeah, it's great, but we want to make sure you also are able to tackle these particular things as well. Just opening that up for the panel.
I think a lot of it really is time, especially in baseball, it's 162 games. And then on top of that, it's, you have a 2-month spring training. And like my first 4 years, like I was in Arizona for spring training 3 weeks. And then, I was working every home game, doing some away games. So you do have to sacrifice a little bit of your time, but, in the end, like it was all rewarding. It's, for my team in particular, like, and Mimi, you could probably say the same for the Spurs, but, you're kind of like the digital voice of the team. And I think it's a lot of pressure, but it's very fulfilling. And so, when times get tough, and trust me, you're going to have that at any job, not just sports. Just reminding myself like, hey, I'm lucky to work in sports, which is what I want to be doing for the team that I love. Like, those are the things that help keep you motivated and keep you going over the course of a long season.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of that. I think, it's not just the time on my end, the travel, will grind you down a little bit too. Scouting, you have to go see guys in a lot of different parts of the country, a lot of different times. So, you look up and it's like, you're 5 different places within a week, and that can grind on you. But like Kyle said, it's the thing of, at least for myself, growing up, you're always on a team. Then you get to college and you're on a team. And then, to be able to be kind of on a team in the workforce and work for something bigger than yourself, I think that kind of gets you over that hump to where it's like, hey, like, I don't know how I'm going to make it to my 10-year-old son's baseball game. I'm going to make all this work. I'm going to get on extra flight, but it's going to be worth it because if this guy I see helps us win a World Series 7 years from now, like, it's all going to pay off. So I think you have to have that mindset of that you're working for something bigger than yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, you had me until you said glamorous, Trent. you're like, it's fun, it's exciting. I was like, yeah, it's glamorous. I was like, oh, I don't know about that.
Sitting in boxes, don't you guys sit in box seats at every game and get to fly in the fancy plane and all that kind of stuff? It's not part of the deal. No.
Best
It's
friends with
not
all the
100%.
players, and yeah, all like that.
Okay, so I think the last question before we open it up for some of the students to ask some things. For each of you, what, and you kind of dibbled and dabbled in it a little bit as we've talked, but what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give for young journalism students coming out today into the sports profession, want to get into the sports, and are facing today's environment? What would you say would be the biggest piece of advice, or what do you wish someone would have told you coming out that would be great for them to know now that you didn't know when you were coming out? Why don't we start with Bobby? I'll just kind of go around again.
For me, it would be, and we touched on it before, just work as hard as you can, work your tail off. And like the flip side of that is don't sell yourself short. Don't limit yourself. I can think of a lot of opportunities early in my career. Like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm qualified for that or whatever. Like, you don't know until you do it. And I think there's a lot of people who are doing a lot of jobs that if you would ask them 10 years ago, they would have said, I can't do that. So to me, it would be just stay true to yourself and keep grinding.
Cam.
I would have to say the knowledge of the sport. If you know you're wanting to go into a specific area, have that knowledge. For me, it was tennis. I knew everything about tennis because I played the sport, but I also was an avid fan of basketball. And I'll never forget it. I applied for a PA position, which is the very entry level with ESPN/Disney. I applied for the position. I got the call from HR. And the first question they asked is, am I speaking with so-and-so? And I said, yes. The second question that followed was, are you near a computer? And I said, no, who am I speaking to? And it was ESPN Talent Acquisition. And he said, you applied for this position. I want to ask you a couple questions, but you can't be sitting at a computer. And so I was like, okay. And keep in mind, like I'm moving and like, oh my gosh, I got this interview. And so he asked me one question. And the question was, did I know the NBA divisions? And I knew it, but I didn't know it at that time because I wasn't well versed in the NBA in terms of knowing, divisions and all that. I wasn't well versed. And so I froze and I said, oh my gosh, I said, can I get a second chance? And he's like, no, we have other people that are applied for this position. If you can't think on your feet quick, then this position is not for you. I was really, really bummed. And so, but, I say, maybe the position wasn't for me because, like I said, I ended up getting the Grizzlies position. And I got the Grizzlies position by mistake. I don't know if you guys know, there's a small college in Memphis, Tennessee called Rose College, small private D3 school. I landed a position there doing marketing communications in the athletics department. But I was also the primary key holder for the Bryan Life Campus Center. And everybody who knows me, knows that I'm a huge Jerry West fan. And at the time, Jerry was the GM there, came in. I got this text from my boss saying, hey, you need to go and open the facilities. A couple guys want to shoot around. And so went and did that. But this was a good setup for me because my then boss knew how much of a fan I was of Jerry, and he knew how desperate I was to get into the industry, and so he was helping me do that. I open up the building, I'm sitting at the table, and kid you not, and this was on my birthday too. And so I'm sitting at the desk, just waiting for these guys to come in, shoot around, whatever. And here comes Mike Clary, my boss, and Jerry West. And Jerry West gives me a kiss on my cheek and tells me happy birthday. And that is how I befriended the Men's Disability Organization. I got in. And so for me, it was, I had to learn the NBA industry, even though I was working in college athletics. And so I did that. I studied. He gave me content. I reached out to different people. One of my closest friends that worked at WPTY, I started shadowing him, started going to every practice that was held at Rhodes. So I started to really train myself, which helped me along the way because not only did I work for the Grizzlies, I also got a chance to work for the Knicks. I also got a chance to work for the 49ers, and then I also worked for the Lakers. I did an internship with the Yankees, and then made it full circle back to the Midwest, working for the Indianapolis franchise. And so I along the way, I started to really got myself familiar outside of the sport of tennis, and started to really, learn the NFL and the NBA. And so if I had to say anything is knowledge, befriend someone that's in the industry. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Once I got my foot in the door and started to make those connections, no question was off the table. So that is the advice that I would give to anybody that's wanting to get into this industry. And don't limit yourself to just basketball or lacrosse or cricket or soccer. Know them all. And that is what college athletics helped me do. As I think about it, I went from pro sports to college athletics, and there was no days off. And just recently made the transition to student affairs. And so just know the industry, know the area, and just don't limit yourself to that.
Great. That's great. Kyle, what advice?
Yeah, I kind of touched on earlier on the groups, and just learning how to be a team player. I think specifically in journalism, like if you're going to go be a beat writer for a team, like you're going to be interacting not only with players, coaches, you're going to be interacting with other media and, leaning on each other, help with transcriptions and, stories and sources. You're always cultivating relationships in sports. So the more you can get used to that at the collegiate level and, even with your peers, just learning how to interact and, develop leadership skills, like it'll go a long way when you get to the career field that you want to be in.
It's good stuff. Amy?
Yeah, Kyle stole mine, which was relationships. I was really lucky to, I have a mentor and he gave me this advice like a few years ago and I took it and I ran with it. The relationships, I know we talk a lot about networking, but he changed the way I saw networking. I think of it as more relationship building than because sometimes with networking, it can become so transactional. So relationship building even before you start whatever job, but then also once you start a job, what he said to me was your first 30 days should focus on building relationships more so than anything else. It's important to learn the job. It's important to learn your responsibilities, but if you focus on relationships and you make that priority, it'll serve you for the rest of your time at that organization. And that is advice that has never failed me to this point. So.
That's great. That's great. So in the next, I guess the last 10 minutes that we have, I wanted to give the students an opportunity to ask any questions of the panelists. So students, this would be a great time if you want to come off camera, come off mute, and feel free to ask a question of the panelists. Everyone's ready to answer any of those. I'm not sure how many folks want to be in sports marketing or interested in that side of things and have some specific questions, but would love to hear from you.
Hey, I'll ask a question real quick. My name is Zach. I'm a senior. I'm currently a broadcast journalism major. I've been trying to figure out what exactly I want to do. It kind of differs here and there. But I think I'm kind of interested in digital media and engagement and trying to figure out how social media side of sports works. Right now, I'm interning with the athletic department, and I've been taking photos and doing graphic design for them. So I guess my question is, media is constantly changing and social media is constantly changing. So I guess for like Kyle and Mimi, like how do you read and calculate that? And how does like the planning process work? And like, how do you communicate with so many different people in your in the communications department, and like how do you sell them on like a content that you're trying to engage with fans? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Zach, and thank you for asking. One thing I learned very quickly, and I think we all know, is content is king. And I think like the more this role has evolved, like in the way just other teams, companies are leaning on social media, like you got to have a content strategy, and you got to be able to know what your fans are looking for. So like our primary KPI, so like our result metric is engagement rate. So the past few seasons it's a little bit harder because we haven't had particularly good seasons on the field. So it's kind of on our team to kind of help spearhead, okay, what are the stories we want to tell about the players that make them more relatable to our fans? Or hey, let's tell them about who's up and coming in AA and high A and who's coming up the ranks and you're going to be rooting for a few seasons from now. So I think to answer your question, like we have a lot of within our marketing department, like I'm like my team, we're not the one designing all these, rookie of the year graphics or stat graphics. Like we have an excellent design team that we lean on. We have a video crew that's putting together these videos that I have no clue how to do. But I think, what's cool about our role and my team's role is that, we're kind of laying out the roadmap and the strategy for what's upcoming, what are the trends, what do fans want to see? And then we're tasked with kind of leading the team and saying, okay, this is what we want to do. And we, work with them and tap into their resources because we have some extremely talented people around us. So it kind of touches on what I was saying earlier about just working in groups, and particularly in our role, like you're working with a lot of different personalities and learning how to tap into their strengths and their weaknesses, and you just really build each other up.
Yeah, and everything Kyle said is so on point and is so relevant to my role and my team and what we do as well. So I think that's a really good like learning opportunity where a lot of these not responsibilities, but core values and being able to do certain things like it transfers from team to team and sport to sport. And then I'll give you two like really tactical things to work on that helps with that. One of which is learn Premiere. So in addition to graphic design and photos, if you're able to learn how to edit quick videos, that's only going to serve you well. For our team as well, we don't create the actual videos like in the actual graphics and all of that. But there are certain situations where we'd have to hop in and just do a quick edit or edit a really short, like social focused video. So if you can add that skill set, that would be very valuable. And then also data share outs. If you could become a whiz at sharing, and this helps with the educating internally, right? Like helping the internal folks understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. If you could do a really good job of taking all the data that we get from all of our different social platforms and being able to give out insights, and insights are different from data, right? Like you don't want to present out where you're only presenting like, hey, this is the engagement rate for the past 3 months, and this is the number of impressions we saw over the past 3 months. If you could take all of that, but turn it into insights and tell a story, you are going to be like miles and miles ahead. And that is something that's going to serve you for the rest of your career. I promise, hand to heart. So 2 tactical things and everything that Kyle said.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's great. Anyone else probably have time for one more question? Anyone else?
Oh,
Maya,
I'm
I
not
think
sure
you're-
if this is.
Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me?
We're having a hard time.
Hello.
Having a little trouble hearing you, Maya. Go try one more time.
How about now?
Yep, we're hearing you.
Oh, okay. This is.
We had you and we lost you.
You want to drop it in the chat, Maya?
That'd be great, Maya. If you could drop it in the chat, that'd be perfect. Anyone else while we're waiting for that? One of the questions, and you guys kind of brought it up, I always wonder how, particularly you guys in social media, how you continue to stay up when the team's not necessarily up. I was looking at some posts from the Cowboys this past week, and I'm just like, we lost. I mean, how can you be posting about these different things when we lost? It's always funny, and I don't know how you guys strike that balance.
It's it's tough because like you don't want to post and sound all like super excited and you're like, oh yay, look at the fun things that are happening when we had like a really bad loss the night before. But at the same time, like there's still so much that has to go out on social. Like you still want to tell stories. You still have like sponsorship response things that you're responsible for that you got to get out. And so we try to we go a little bit dark after a loss for a few hours. Like after a win, we'll post a ton of highlights after the game the next day, etc. After a loss, you'll notice we go a little bit dark that night and then early the next day, and then we try to pick up in a kind of like a respectful way. But sometimes it's a toss up because you might have a loss, but then someone has an incredible game. It's like, how do you tell that story, despite the fact that it was a loss? I don't think there's a right answer, unless Kyle, you have the right answer.
I do not.
Please.
I was hoping you were going to provide that wisdom. No, you got to just kind of read the room sometimes. And like, depending on the loss, like, there's times for, you got to pick your spots with self-deprecation or kind of like what Mimi said, like we go pretty much dark if we lose a game. But there, there's a joke around the office, like, hey, don't read the comments. And it's like, I wish I didn't have to, but if I'm doing my job correctly, like you got to be reading the comments. So yeah, we'll hope for there's better days some days. So.
All right, well, we've got about a minute left. So I just want to take the time to thank you all for being part of the panel. Students, I want to thank you all for joining us. I know you guys are busy, you've got classes and all sorts of stuff going on. So hopefully you've got a lot out of this. Panelists, thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us and just hopefully inspire these students to consider a career in sports and the possibilities of how to get there and what it's going to take. So I think it's been fantastic. I want to thank you for being part of the Mayborn Mentors program. And until next time, I want to say goodbye. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.